What is going on, guys? Dublar back here with another Diablo 3 Season 10 patch 2.5.0 build guide. This time bringing you a pretty frequently requested build, the zDPS/Healer Monk. This build's an essential part of any GR push team and is a great asset for anyone, including solo players. This is due to the fact that group play makes it much easier to clear high GRs that are outside of the normal reach of solo players. This should allow you to level gems and augments much higher than you normally be able to, and earn much more experience per run. So before we get into the build, I want to point out that since this is a group-oriented build, some of the skills and gear could be switched out to maximize the effectiveness of your particular group. The base build that I'm going to cover should get you up and running, and should get you clearing GRs relatively easy. However, I'll cover some of the alternatives in order to give you an understanding of what could be switched out. With that said, I'll go ahead and give an overview of the build, and then we'll break down the gameplay. I highly encourage you to also check out the build guide link in the details for the full breakdown on stat priorities. So getting into gear, we'll start off with the set pieces. We'll run the Innis set for the 2 and 4 piece bonuses. The 2 piece bonus will boost our mantra's base passive effect by 100%, and the 4 piece will give us the base effect of all 4 mantra runes at all times. For Innis, we'll want to run it on the chest, gloves, belt, and pants. The other set that we'll run is Istvan's Paired Blades. These serve as a great source of additional stats by increasing our attack speed, damage, and armor by 6% for 5 seconds. This effect can be stacked up to 5 times, giving us up to a 30% increase of the aforementioned stats. As for gem choices, Amethyst will give you a massive life per hit bonus, which will help keep you alive. However, as you begin to acquire better gear, staying alive will become much less of an issue. When you reach this point, it's much more effective to swap out 1 Amethyst for a Gem of Ease for the XP bonus. For the helm, we'll run Leoric's Crown. This is going to amplify the socketed gem in it by 75 to 100%. Ideally, we want to get as close to 100% as possible here, and we want to socket a diamond in here for the additional CDR. For shoulders, we'll run the Cyclone Strike shoulders that I'm not going to try to pronounce. These are going to give us an additional 40 to 50% damage reduction for 5 seconds after we cast Cyclone Strike. For bracers, we'll pick between the better rolled of our Strong Arms and Spirit Guards. Strong Arms are going to increase the damage by 20 to 30% on enemies that are affected by knockbacks. Our Cyclone Strike will serve as a proc for this. And Spirit Guards will allow our Spirit Generators to reduce our damage by up to 40% for 3 seconds. Moving into the Amulet slot, this is a bit flexible. Hellfire is a good choice here, but you can also run an immunity amulet. Either way, we want one with good stats like CDR and attack speed, and a usable passive if we're running Hellfire. We'll get into passives in a minute. For rings, we'll run Oculus. This has a good chance to spawn pools that'll increase the damage of anyone standing in them by 75 to 85%. This is an all-around good boost to DPS players. For our other ring, we'll run Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac. This ring is great at reducing cooldowns. It'll shave 1 second off the cooldown of a random skill every time we hit an enemy with a resource spending attack. For this build, Cyclone Strike will serve as a proc for this ring. Moving into legendary gems, we'll run Esoteric Alteration. This will reduce non-physical damage up to 60% depending on the level of the gem. This will also increase elemental resistance by 75% when we're below 50% life. We'll run the gem of Effivacious Toxin for both the 10% damage increase and the 10% damage reduction. And finally, Ice Blink for the 10% critical hit chance to chilled enemies. So a bit of a side note here. Esoteric Alteration should be the only gem that we level beyond 25. The other gems will increase our damage, which really won't matter since we're not dealing anything anyways, or in the case of Ice Blink, can interfere with the effectiveness of other support players. Moving into the cube, for the weapon slot, we'll run the Flying Dragon, which will give us a chance to double our attack speed. For the armor slot, we'll choose between the lower rolled bracers that we talked about earlier. These are Spirit Guards or Strong Arms. And for our last piece of jewelry, we'll run the Band of Rude Chambers. This will increase spirit for spirit regenerators by 40 to 50%. Just like bracers, rings can be swapped, but this will depend on how well your gear's rolled. As for stats, again I encourage you to look at the full build guide for the stat priorities of each individual gear piece. But as a rule of thumb, on our sheet, we want to shoot for around 65% CDR and around 50% attack speed. I'm a bit low here on attack speed because I'm missing it on my weapon and my amulet. So moving on into skills, our first skill here, Crippling Wave with the Tsunami rune. This is going to be our main attack. This will serve as a spirit generator and will also help crowd control by slowing and freezing nearby enemies. We run the Tsunami rune because it adds a cold proc for our Ice Blink, but if we go ahead and swap that out for something during speedruns like Gogok, we can go ahead and swap this rune for something else. Our next skill, Blinding Flash with the Crippling Light rune. This skill is going to blind enemies for 3 seconds and the rune's going to add an additional 25% damage reduction. Mantra of Salvation with the Agility rune. The active effect here will increase resistances by 20% for 3 seconds. We'll want to spam this skill throughout the entire run, even when we're not in combat. The constant use of this skill will ensure that we keep those 5 paired blade stacks up at all times. Cyclone Strike with the Soothing Breeze rune. This is a great skill that will pull in nearby enemies towards us. This makes it much easier for our DPS to focus their damage. The rune choice here, Soothing Breeze, will give additional healing to allies within range, but this can be swapped out for other runes like Implosion for the increased pull range. Inner Sanctuary with the Temple of Protection rune. This is going to allow us to be immune to control impairing effects, which will allow us to continue to attack even when we have those affixes that are going to slow us down. This can be swapped over to something like Safe Haven if we really need the extra healing. And finally, Epiphany with the Soothing Mist rune. This is an all-around great skill that's not only going to increase our spirit regeneration by 20 per second and add a blast of healing with the rune, but it's also going to serve as a great movement skill when we're transitioning between mobs. So moving on into passives, we'll run the Beacon of Etar for the 20% cooldown reduction, Resolve for the 20% damage reduction for 4 seconds, Seize the Initiative for the 4 seconds of 30% increased attack speed when damage is dealt to enemies over 75% health. This is a passive that we'll want to keep up as much as possible. And for our last one, Near Death Experience for the Free Life. If you're running Hellfire, you want to have a good 5th passive that's going to help out your entire group. The majority of monks at the top of the leaderboards this season are running Unity for the additive damage increase, but Alacrity is also a decent option here if you're lacking the necessary attack speed. So we'll jump into this GR94 gameplay and break it down to give you guys a good idea of how to play this build. The first thing we'll talk about is Epiphany. This is a skill that we want to keep up as much as possible. The extra spirit regen allows us to continually spam skills, and the mobility ensures that we're able to keep up with our teammates. You want to occasionally cast your mantra during the transition time to keep your paired blade stacks up as well. Now ideally, you would have wanted to enter this fight using Epiphany and dashing into the center to begin your rotation, but I had not reset it yet. When you do enter a fight, you want to begin by dropping a Sanctuary to reduce the damage to yourself and any allies nearby. At the same time, you should begin attacking enemies with your Crippling Wave for both the spirit and life regen. You should continue to use this attack until you leave the pack. You will continue to cast your mantra during this time and begin to cast your Cyclone Strike. The Cyclone Strike will proc the Zodiac Ring and reduce the cooldown of all your skills, as well as pull in enemies towards you. One of the most important things is to make sure your Sanctuary does not disappear. You also want to keep a close eye on Epiphany and refresh it on cooldown or when you notice that an ally needs a healing boost. Finally, Blinding Flash is the last skill on our bar and should be used to further reduce incoming damage and disorient enemies. And that's pretty much the build. You'll continue to cycle through these skills and enable your DPS to deal much more damage than they normally would. So anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something from it. If you did, don't hesitate to hit that like button or let me know about it down in the comments. Also, don't forget to get subscribed to know about my latest D3 content. As always, I wish you guys luck this season, and I'll see you guys in the next video.